Nims. So here we are. So we've been friends for many, many, many years. We've been through good times, bad times, everything together. But it's extraordinary because as much as I know you and as much as we've been through, you going for mayor, it's like, okay, you know, I'm excited about this because where is our leader? Where was our leader for Black Lives Matter? You know, where is our Farrakhan? Where is our Martin Luther? Where's our Obama? You know, we don't have that. And when I think about Nims I know, I'm think, actually, yes, this really could be the answer. But people aren't going to take this answer just because I say so. And even I think, well, let's go deeper and let's find out, should you be the first Black mayor of London? You know, and being Black is one thing, but should you be mayor? Period. But Black mayor specifically as well for me, because I think there's so many things that we need Black leadership for as well. You know, and when I say we, I mean London as the people rather than just the city, the place. I'm not political, but you know, as I get older, I do become more political. So I have a lot of questions. I have a teenage son, for example. So today we're going to be talking about violence and knife crime and all, you know, violence on the streets of London and how, what you could do to help. What would you recommend to make London safer? You know, I have a teenage son and a teenage daughter. You know, they're still just under the age of being able to roam freely, but very, very soon they'll be out there.
Right.
You know, how do I know they're going to be safe? We've had 7 deaths just this year.
Look, Sunita, I'm really concerned about the state of play. You know that 20 years ago, I started this fight for the heart of London, trying to save our kids. I'm not going to be able to mention many names and families that I have buried or been involved with the trauma that family has gone through, but I do want to recall a particular name that never leaves my mind, and his name was Tyrone Rowe. And I remember Tyrone Rowe way back in 2000, thereabout. He unfortunately had been shot at, and I remember talking with his mom and his dad, and we were at his bedside. He was in a coma, and unfortunately he lost his life, and he was the only child for his mom, and I'll never forget the pain that she went through. And
How old was he?
Tyron was in his teens, and being an only child, I at that point in time, I had felt that these are young children who were being killed in our community. And then I was a pastor of a church, and I still am, but then the issue is some of those young people who were being killed, they'd never necessarily come back, or who were killing, wouldn't necessarily come into our churches, but the issue was we needed to go out there and do something to change the narrative of what was happening on our streets. And so that was 20 years back. And we started something called the Peace Alliance.
Yeah.
And the Peace Alliance was set up to respond to the violence on our streets. We did everything at that point in time we knew to do. We set up multimedia packages which we sent into schools. I developed a comic. I developed some video material, some film products. We worked with the most challenging of individuals. We worked in Feltham Prison, went into different prisons across the country, had ex-offenders come into our organization who eventually acted as managers to support the most challenged individuals in our community.
I remember when you had us, you had me and Ashley Cole and a group of others, and we all met with some of the young, really super young gang members.
Absolutely.
And I couldn't believe it. And I remember I was quite nervous turning up that day thinking, gosh, you know, I've never been in that sort of environment with these kind of people. They were little kids who'd been stabbing and doing all these things and actually not intimidating, frightening people at all, but almost circumstances and wanting to belong is how they found themselves in these gangs.
And they're still little kids today. And so we've got to, I think that we have to go beyond the knife and look at the life behind the knives.
Yeah, the why, the reason.
We've got to understand what's the life behind that knife. What's going on in the family setup. You know, what are we doing to prevent this happening? And that's why we set up that Peace Alliance. That's why we set up the London Week of Peace. So, I'm running for mayor now, but for the last 20 years or thereabout, I've been running so many different initiatives trying to address violent crime.
And doing it yourself, with
Minimal resources,
but not with a government behind you to actually really, have a nation.
That's why I'm
wide
running.
Effect, and that's why you're here, because you've approached it from a spiritual side as well, because you are still pastor of your church. You've had us marching and praying in the streets.
Absolutely.
Again, I was shocked by the poverty and rundown conditions that I saw here in London in this day and age. When you think, a long time ago, but that some of the circumstances are so horrendous now.
Yes, Anita, look, you've been out there. You've been on the streets with us. We've had thousands of people on our streets walking and praying and campaigning against violence on our streets. You've been there where we had over 15,000 people at Trafalgar Square, still having our peace concerts and trying to address this issue. You've been there at the dinners where we've celebrated people who have made a difference in London during the London Peace Awards. These were things we initiated because we felt we wanted to make a difference. We had minimal support from government, but somehow or the other we've always felt we need to keep driving this agenda forward. And I've got to that point where I do know that there is something we can do about the state of affairs in our nation. And I recognize that if we're going to address knife crime in its entirety, we need to do more than just put more police on the streets. We need to have some conversations around economic empowerment. We need to look into the areas where you just alluded to, the issues around poverty. What can we do around where there's a poverty of aspiration, poverty of opportunity, and we actually find the real poverty that exists in our communities. Right now, before COVID, we were running a support service in my church organization in the Peace Alliance, Freedom's Ark and Peace Alliance, as a partnership. We have a food bank and a food hub. The food bank operates on a Monday, and on a Thursday we deliver food to people's homes. But then we had about 500 people. Now we have over 3,000 people in our database who we're actively given food to take to their homes. And I see such poverty in our community, such hardship. And we've got to come to that place where those young people who feel they have to create an alternative economy for their family, and mothers who say to me and have said to me, what do? I know what he's doing, but I can't stop him from doing it because it's helping put food on the table. How do we empower those families to turn around from a lifestyle that's destroying them, destroying their child, but the mother does not know any other way out? We've got to start looking at some of we might need to be a bit tactful here, but we need to be innovative also. That's why I believe in having innovation hubs and training modules that actually work with criminals. I intend to work with criminals to get criminals out of crime.
Well, you always have.
I always have, and I think the mayor needs to be bold, and we need to have some audacious activity where you say, I will work with every and any criminal if it will save lives, if it will change the narrative, and if it will start doing things. People aren't born criminals. Okay, people may be criminals, but they're not born criminals. And we can work on working to the better self. London we're a city that needs hope. We need to believe that things can change. We need to believe that, you can't arrest your way out of the problem. And in order not to arrest the way out of the problem, we need to come to that place where collectively and holistically, we're doing things to make London the better city that we all dream of.
Yeah, I love it, and doing something, because it's what you've always done. So this isn't something that you're jumping on now. Oh, this is what I will do if I'm mayor. It's something you've always done. Like you said, without the real support that could make a difference quicker, and also addressing London as a people, not just a certain group of people, but understanding that actually people living in abject poverty, the criminals, the young kids that are being brought into a life of crime, they are London as well.
Oh, they are, and their families are Londoners, and we don't want to continue to have to bury our young kids. I have been in the most traumatic scenarios, and some of the parents who may be watching now they've been at some of the funerals I've had, and it's been devastating. Last year, I remember having to bury a son And that was the third son who had been killed in London. You know, and I remember the trauma of that family. They were, and they are really keen for us to do something together. I want to work with Londoners to change the narrative. I believe that as a mayor, what we've got to do is we've got to ensure that the voice of Londoners will be heard, the enabling of Londoners to work together. We empower our neighborhoods to make that difference. We start working through from the bottom up, not just from the top down.
And to actually be able to, for the whole of London to understand how important that is, because London will be a safer city. London will be a happier city. London can heal, you know, but we have to take care of everyone. We can't just look after people who are already okay. We can't just step over and pretend it's not happening. Like you said, we've got to make a difference from the ground up, because we are one.
We are all Londoners. But here's an uncomfortable conversation, but I will have to do this as mayor. I intend to follow the money trail. I intend to follow the drug trail. So you see, even in those places where we find the comfort in the upper echelons of society, they are drug taking in their home, and they're paying those drugs. They're paying runners to deliver those drugs to the very, you know, posh, prestigious areas where they live. What we need to do is follow the trail, and we need to do is follow the phone trail, follow the drug trail. Make sure that, you see, it's an issue of demand and supply. Okay, and so that person, and I want Londoners to understand that person who feels comfortable taking drugs in their very posh, elaborate homes needs to know that they're sucking on or smoking on the blood of our kids on the streets.
Wow.
And, you know, we need to start challenging the conscience of London.
Yeah, if you watch these movies like, say, The Wolf of Wall Street or something like that,
and
it's true.
It is true.
And it's like, we do need that education, that this big divide for people to realize, you know, the divide is actually very superficial, like we're seeing with COVID. You know, it's no respecter of people. But if you are buying, whether you're buying drugs to take in, you know, your palaces or whatever, or taking them on the street, the source is still the same.
It's still the same. And so we intend to look at where the sources are, and we will be, you know, we need to have that moment where we say, you're not going to use our children as runners for drug trade. We're going to save our kids. We're going to give them a dream, something to dream about. You know, they're in the Peace Alliance, there was something we developed about dreams, developing real examples and mentors. People need to have somebody, you know, it's an acronym. You know, I feel like people need to have somebody that they can look up to. You're a role model for so many people, and I've seen you, even when I've come into your studio and see you, how you've supported young people. You've even supported my son, you know, and that's amazing, because what we need are people who can empower those young people to believe that there's a future after, you know, and talking about
be afraid. And not be afraid, because like I admitted, I was afraid. I felt like, oh, what, am I going to go into a prison, or I'm going to meet people, you know, kids who are involved in crime, and then you meet them and they're kids. They're still people. They're just people who, you know, the circumstances have gotten on top of them, and they've been sucked into the wrong way. Like you said, they don't have the guidance, or the mother is overwhelmed and can't get involved. But those of us who are able need to actually get involved. I mean, it's more cultural for us, because I think as a race of people, understand that it takes a village to raise a child. But we need to have that mentality for London, for everybody to go, okay, you see that child, not to go, oh, well, no, that child's dirty, that child's homeless, that child's black. If you see something, help and do something. You know, we need to stop correcting from the bottom up. It's
interesting you say this, Anita. Please, can I just point out to you, we have a 5-point strategy that I've worked on, you know, over the years, and I've said this over and over again about how you can get peace to happen in the city. And there's a 5-point plan I have, and it's about parenting that is proper. You just said that, you know, whether it's from a foster home, and we find out that children even from foster homes sometimes are more likely to be excluded. So we need to see what support structures we're giving the parenting structures for our children. So we want to see a system where we have parenting classes for those that are most vulnerable. So we have parenting that's proper. We work with agencies that are doing stuff and those families that need that intervention, we get to that early intervention. So there's something about parenting that is proper. But, you know, the child comes out of that home, he's, you know, after meeting mom and dad or whoever that support structure is. They come into a different framework. And what's the next thing a child does? It goes to school. And
that becomes the primary influence, because they're spending more time at school than anywhere else, and so they become each other's primary influence as well.
So for us, it's about education that's effective and that's holistic. So that's the next tier. So when you're going up the stairs,
schools,
so from the parenting structure, let's go into the educational framework. What are we doing about our children? Are we just sending them to people referral units, which becomes a recruitment center for criminal behavior? So the fact that a child may be struggling, dyslexic, or struggling with reading, or having issues about behavioral ADHD, or whatever the issues may be, we don't know the background those kids have come from. Some children have come from homes that are very troubled and challenged, and they're put in a school, mainstream school, without having the psychological support in order to manage the traumas they're feeling at home. So we need an education that's holistic, education that's effective for our young people. Then for me, there's...
And for them to understand it's not just academic education, but social education, survival education, and prevention should be hand in hand with our academic education at school.
And so we've got to ensure the educational framework is right and is enabling and is empowering to raise children for the future. So that brings me to the third area about achievements that are celebrated. So, and so what do I mean by achievements that are celebrated? Sinita, do you remember, because I have recollections of this, when I would bring the most nasty picture that I could ever draw at school and bring it home, and I go, look at what I did, and it's a nasty picture. Oh my gosh, this is so cute, this is amazing, and put on the fridge. Sorry, I'm just getting excited here. But say this is an amazing picture. And now imagine those children that carry that picture home, but in reality they don't have that support structure where someone says, well done, this is a beautiful picture.
Or maybe nobody's
there to celebrate them and say, shut up, go to your room, or there's no sense of celebration for that child. Psychologically, that child's self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence takes a dive. And so we're dealing with it. For me, there's a role that we've got to see how we empower young people and celebrate their achievements and make sure that they know there's somebody. During the Peace Awards, I'll never forget this. There was a young person. We had something called the Turnaround Awards. The Turnaround Awards were for people who have had experienced criminal behavior, and now they've turned their life around.
Oh, I love that.
And so we called it the Turnaround Awards.
I think I went to this. And they tell the story, and then it's like, this is where I was, and this is where I'm now. I love that.
You were at the dinner. You've been at some of our dinners there. And one of the guys that was getting an award that night, his mom is a cleaner. I'll not forget this story. His mom was a cleaner. He had never worn a suit in his life. Because his mom knew he had been invited to the Savoy to get an award and he was going to get one, she went out there and bought him his first suit ever. And for him, he shared this story that my mom bought me a suit just to be here. So because nobody had never been celebrated.
I've never seen someone so proud. You thought he'd just been crowned or knighted, wasn't it?
And that is so important that people start feeling their achievements are being celebrated. So for me, there is a massive thing around achievement that's celebrated. And I want Londoners to work with us to celebrate the greatness in each one of us, and especially in our children. Then there's a fourth dimension, which brings me to the issue when I say Londoners. You alluded to it, the communities that are mobilized. You said it takes a village to raise a child. That mindset needs to exist in our city, that we do this together. It's not just the mayor's responsibility. I want to be the people's mayor. I don't just want to be a partisan mayor that's just got policies that go nowhere. I want to be a mayor that has the people that go everywhere. And so we're actually going into the nook and crannies of our city, and we're saying this is our city. We're restoring that hope and that excitement about London. I remember the two different times in London, and I'll come back to the fifth one. Two different times in London that were very poignant for us. One was the 2011 riots, where the city burnt down. And some parts of our city burned down. I buried Mark Duggan. I knew the support that I gave his family, and being part of, I was there on the streets when the first police car got broken into, and trying to talk to the young people. I saw the pain, the trauma, the ripping of the heart of our community at that time, and how that cascaded, and people were crying out for justice. It was a very painful moment. But then I was also part of the Olympics community engagement team with 2012. So I was part of the Black Leadership, and I chaired the Black Leadership Empowerment Network, ensuring that the Black community and other minority communities got a good deal out of the Olympics, and try to do a whole range of things, and engaging with faith organizations and others, just to ensure that the Olympics was something to celebrate. And you know what? London, from the pain and the bloodshed and the burn and the ashes of 2011, rose to the best of our, we were a resilient city. And in between that, I saw the beauty of Londoners bringing, I remember going into some of the sports halls and with our donations, and seeing Londoners bring their donations to help rebuild the lives of those whose lives have been destroyed. And then we get into 2012, where the world celebrated London. We had the most amazing Olympic Games in our city. Now, that's what I want to see. I want to see, we've had a very painful season with COVID. We've had a painful time with the trauma of people being furloughed, lost jobs, and all that stuff. Now, what do we do? And a lot of people have lost their lives. And another conversation, let's talk about COVID. But what I want to see now is a city that can be celebrated, where we start coming together as one, and we say, as one city, we're mobilized to do what's great for London. We're not caught up with whether you're Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, Green Party. We're bridge builders. We're people.
We're people first.
We're intentional. And this is why I think I can be an independent mayor, because I want to be a mayor for all, not for some.
That is so important. And you think not every mayor has been able to reach everyone.
Absolutely.
And it almost hasn't really been the goal. I think it's really important that this is happening now, because while we're in lockdown, because one of my concerns is, what happens when lockdown's lifted and everyone's suddenly back on the streets again? Everyone's pent up.
They'll have a new mayor, that's me.
Well, please God, amen. Because we're resensitized as well now, because we've been away from a lot of our usual stresses and strains of being out there. However, there's new anxieties and new challenges. But when the lockdown's lifted, what happens? Is it going to be like post, the 50, 60, where everyone goes party crazy? Is it going to be debauchery, bedlam, and madness?
Well, hopefully what will happen is we will get to that fifth aspect, which I was going to talk about.
Ooh, okay.
Which is enterprise and employment that's sustainable.
Ooh.
So for us, it's about trying to ensure that what we have is job creations, opportunities, looking at the strength of our city. London is an economic hub, and is an economic hub for the world. And we've got to celebrate the strength of what we have in the city, and we need to try and cascade our economic empowerment into every borough and make sure our high streets are somehow revitalized, because
people are so worried about Brexit, but this is an opportunity for us to use our homegrown, in-house,
absolutely,
or in-city,
grown in
country
Britain,
people.
Grown in Britain, made in Britain, made in London. We have amazing entrepreneurs in our and you know what, we need social entrepreneurs, because we're in a city and a nation that has such capabilities. I found out often that what you find in the United States, a lot of our creative genius is taken to the US because people are ready to fund that. In the US, we need to be able to fund back our own, back British products, back London products. Make sure that we start saying what your creative ingenuity is going to be used to make our city and our capital better. And we need to make sure it's not just in one community. We need to cascade that across London and let every part of every borough become economic hubs, and start seeing what investment we give in those communities. So I think that we need to invest not just in one area, but in all areas of London, and especially amongst our young people, because I know we often say that the young people are the future, but the fact is, with violent crime in itself, even the Violent Crime Reduction Unit has already said that over 450 million was spent in 2019 to 2020 for the use of to spend on violent crime. That refers to the response from emergency services, the hospital care, and all the things that happen. I remember at one point.
But that's the consequences, not the prevention.
It's absolutely. So what's happening is we're spending on post-trauma, whereas we can be invested into preventing the trauma, and that's what's got to happen in London. We need to start thinking actively on how we protect the future of our city, our capital, and our young people. That is what I will do as the Mayor of London. I will do the very best I can, and I will work with anybody and everybody who's ready to do something to make our city better, because that's what we've been doing for the last 20 years, just that we didn't get the back end, the support that we should have.
And now is the time.
Now is the time. We're stepping up.
Do you know what I find so interesting as well is that you look around the world, there's this video that went viral and it was showing how many black female leaders and prime ministers there are all over the world. And I think, you know, you're in some great company, so why not the first black male mayor as well? And I love because what you're saying is that instead of, you know, that you can bring London together as well, and if every community plays their part, so from the higher echelons to the people who are less privileged and currently living sort of below the poverty line, if we can have improvements in all those areas and everybody's playing their role strongly, the whole city here becomes healthier altogether. But we all have to care about each aspect. And people, the reason why I like that you're not sort of saying you're left or you're right is because you have people with a lot of money who are worried about, what about my money? And then you have people with no money going, well, it's all right for them because they got money and nobody cares about us. But understanding that we all have to care about everybody. We don't want the people who have money to take their money and go someplace else, because we need to still have money invested in entrepreneurs, like you said, in London, helping rebuild the city, rebuild businesses, re-employ people again. But we also need this community to realize that there is going to be that there needs to be that availability to rise as well. And we can't stay divided. We're not going to make it.
London is not going to thrive if we're divided post-COVID. And what we don't need is a mayor that's going to be blaming central government to say, because I'm Labour, you're Conservative, and that, you know, we don't need head-on collusions, because that is basically a city going nowhere. What we need to do is we need to not just survive, we need to thrive. And in order for us to thrive, we're going to need to ensure that we build for the future. And one of the things that I think about, even in relation to political apathy, is that we have a mayor that was voted in on his first count about 900,000 votes. On the second count, over 1 million. He went over the million number.
But how many people didn't vote?
There you go. So in London, how many people do we have? We have bridging into 8-point-something million to 9 million people. And so you have a mayor who was elected by just 1-point-something million people. There is such a sense that this mayoralty does not involve me. I don't want that in this election.
People need to understand, if you want London to change, you have to put someone in power that can help take on board the changes that we want, so it can make a difference.
Absolutely. And who's going to make sure that your voice is not lost, and that you see, I don't want political apathy in London. I think Londoners need to ensure that their voice is heard. People feel that their lives have gone out of control. They feel, and you know, I know we're talking about knife crime and violence in our streets, but I just want to bring that sense of people regaining that sense of structure, order, that the future is secure. And in order to do that, what we want to do is we want to bring London together and put our Londoners first. That's got to be the goal. We've got to try to say we can take back our streets. We can take, you know, yes, I want to see a lot more ethnic minority officers so that represent London. I want to see black, white, I want to see brown, I want to see all our, you know, this is a very diverse city. Let's ensure that the people who police our city are diverse enough to become the uncles and aunties that will look at those young kids and say, get in the van. And have an encounter with them that challenges their behavior. I used to be part of the Stop and Search Scrutiny Panel for the Home Office, and I chaired the London Criminal Justice Board Advisory Group. So I was overseeing criminal justice with the chair for all of London. And those were some of the issues I was raising at that point in time for a number of years. I wanted to see a London that was actually run by us, because we are Londoners, because we know the solutions to our children. We know what it takes to fix we know what it is to press the reset button where things have gone wrong.
Yeah.
And we
so
need
stop
to,
and search becomes, stop and chat for a minute.
Absolutely.
Like, young man, what do you do? We know how to speak to our kids. It doesn't have to go from 0 to 100. Yeah, and also for the kids on the street, I think to know that they're safe and that they can trust that they're not being criminalized when they're not actually guilty.
Here is one truth. Unfortunately, we have heard the police commissioner say institutional racism is not true. It's an unhelpful word. Yet yesterday I listened to the news, and we have superintendents from the police, ex-superintendents from the police, suing the police for racism and feeling that, as an Asian woman, she was dealt a bad hand in her encounter with policing. I believe that we can have a fair and a just police system that deals with institutional racism to the core, and have a police service that allows both police officers to feel that they belong, irrespective of where they come from, whatever their race is, but also gives young people a sense that they can be part of that institution and that establishment. I started having some conversations with some young people, and I'm trying to get young people to get in now, because that secures the future in number of years to come. So we've got to deal with and that's one of the things I will do as mayor. We've got to deal with that distrust that has existed and the failing that has existed in policing some of our young people. I'm not giving that as an excuse for the violence on our streets, but I'm saying even with that, we can do better if we have a police service that is by policing by consent, working in partnership with our communities, and ensuring that the police officers feel supported by the community, but the community also feels supported by the police. And then we start thinking of what we do together to achieve a society that's equitable.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So needed, because nowadays you see, people in trouble are, more afraid when the police turn up because they don't know what's going to happen or how they're going to be treated.
There's a thing about confidence in police, in that, I know the police keep on checking the stats on that, and we've, sometimes it dips, sometimes it goes up a bit. We just need to ensure that we have a trajectory that keeps on saying the confidence in policing keeps going up and up, because our communities begin to feel safer. And they feel safer because we have, I want to see a stronger sense of neighborhood policing, where officers stay there for the longer term and they start engaging with little Joey.
And start to know that
exactly.
they know, and it's reassuring. It's a reassuring presence.
That's it.
That they can say, hey, aren't you supposed to be home now?
Right.
And it is more of a community support and community help than policing people as well.
It is.
So that presence isn't a sinister presence.
So back to something I saw. I'll give you a story that happened to me. I went for an event at the police college, at Hennon College, and I was driven there I got to the station, I was driven by a police officer. And on my way back after the event, this officer driving me back happened, I kind of asked his name, told me, and he just, I said, what are, and he was a special constable. But he's also a fund manager in the city. So he actually, that's his choice. He's not paid by the police, but he's a special constable. Yeah. But he's actually a proper officer. He's a proper police officer, a special constable with all the rights of policing. But then what he does is he takes time out from his business to actually be a police officer. Now, here's the exciting thing. I would love to see a lot of members from our various communities, Black, Asian, and other communities, who are professionals, come in as special constables. Make it easy for them to come in, much easier, so that when they're dealing with some of the young kids on our streets, they begin to talk to them about aspirations, opportunities, and that they could have, and start saying, meet me in my office tomorrow. And it's not just meet me in the cell, I'm going to lock you in the cell, but we start making those young people dream of a future.
Change your mindset.
It's a mindset adjustment.
Show them what else is,
That's it.
What else they could be doing, another path. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So those are the kind of things I want to see happen. And I really want to work with people who have been ex-offenders, who have started their own businesses, bring in their skill set to say, you know what, we can help these organizations. Invest into that. Invest into people who genuinely can make a difference, and who know, you know, and there are a lot of charities who say we're doing so much. Well, let's start testing it. Let's have the acid test. Let's make sure. Let's check the numbers. Let's start ensuring that people's lives are being changed, and you're doing what it takes to stop the violence on our streets and to discard the mindset that allows a young child to think they need to carry a knife. I remember I went to Felton Prison, and I had some 3 young men in there, and when they heard I was a pastor, they didn't want to have a conversation with me. So they said, no, we're going out, child, man, I don't need this. So I said, listen, mate, I said, give me 3 minutes. And if after my 3 minutes, you don't want to have this conversation, you can go. 2 hours later, 2 hours later, one of them, you know, they were all asking for my details, and one of them eventually came out of prison and came to work in my organization. Because, you know, one of the things I said to those young people, I said, you can count the seeds in an apple, but you cannot count the apples in a seed. And I said, you're so busy going out there to mess with other people's apples, and you're just going for their seed. But you fail to recognize that in your seed, there's so many apples, there's so much. You've forgotten your own orchard. You're just busy tapping it all. And I began to talk to them about their essence, who they were, their value systems, empowering them to dream about who they could be. And, you know, I'm so glad I've seen so many young people whose lives have been turned around by some of the work we've done, but also organizations like myself or churches that are doing amazing work with some young people. And there again, let me put this out. I really believe you can't play down, and no matter what people say about it, you can't play down the role of faith, whether you're Christians, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh. You know, I know we have a secular society, and some of London is secular, but a lot of London is driven by faith. We have to empower faith organizations to be a response to some of this malaise we see in society.
Especially when it comes to young people, because it's not like the days when we just had, you know, 5 TV networks, 5 radio stations, 5 newspapers, and, you know, largely everyone was, you know, affected and influenced by quite small mediums. Now, young people hardly even watch TV. They don't listen. You know, we don't know that they can actually be switched off from society and just TV. Living in their own social media. They create their own TV. They're in their own social media world. So how do we reach them? And that's what I also like about what you do, because you're actually in the neighborhoods, you're touching the people, you're touching the communities, and it's not about just having that slot on the BBC or whatever, but obviously, again, as mayor, you would have that presence as well. And I think that's the big difference, is that you are actually in the streets, in the communities. And so if we can put you, you know, on the screens, on the terrestrial channels, on all the media, so that you're able to, you know, to be the bridge. Right, you can actually be the bridge that brings the country together, and everyone is listening, you know, to one man again. Because, you know, all this fake news, and you don't know. I know we're going to do COVID, hopefully as a live chat, hopefully next week. And guys, I hope that you'll jump on this, that you'll send us questions, you'll jump on this, because, you know, we have to make big decisions now, and we have someone who says that he's in a position to help advise us and lead us and help us and support us to get the things that we need. So this is an opportunity to empower him to help us. You know, if this is the right man, we'll know. We've got 12 weeks to hear what he's got to say, and to ask him, more importantly, what we want to know. I feel lost. I feel lost in the city. I feel lost.
Here's one reality. I want to say this to Londoners. Your voice is what counts most, not mine. Your voice is what's going to determine who becomes the next mayor. But it's not just about who becomes the next mayor. What's important to me is this, that the solutions don't just lie in one man. The solutions lie in all of us working together. And what I'd want to see is not me walking just into City Hall on my own. I want to ask you, if you're able to go on our website, tell us what you think, tell us what the challenges are, tell us what you think the solutions are. I will give you the best I can. I can only do that. And with the, I won't say the wealth of experience, the limited knowledge I have of London. It's been 20 years in different, or a bit more, working in different frames, working for London. But it's not enough for me to say, this is what I will do. I want us to get to that moment where we say, this is what we will do. And in order for us to say, this is what we will do, it's about you actually taking responsibility for your city, for your community, for our children. It's our business, not just a political party. Let's get beyond the partisan politics. Let's get into the people, and let's make London work.
Yeah, this is our time. This is our chance. It's not about we can't sit back and just let things happen to us anymore. Like, if we take responsibility, we have a say, and we have a chance to get our issues addressed and to work with someone to help change the city, because London is all of us. The same way we say a church is not a building, church is the people in it. London is us, those of us who live here, work here, whose children live here. If we want to make a difference and do something about knife crime, there's a bunch of initiatives that Nims is working on that can help us to do that. We're going to talk about COVID next time. We're going to talk about we're going to talk about so many.
We'll talk about housing. We'll talk about economy. We'll talk about Brexit, essentially the economy, and I think it's important that Londoners become part of that conversation by sending in some of the things they also want us to talk about.
Get involved. Send your
emails. Get in touch with us. Email nims@london, and we'll put that detail right now. It should be showing on your screen right now. Just email us, phone us, get in touch. Let the conversation begin. You're important. You're Londoners, and Londoners matter the most.